Okay, so this is going to be the lab portion of the lecture on the skeletal system. There are the objectives. Today we're going to get through identifying bony landmarks and then talk about some of the bones in the skull, the arm, and the shoulder girdle. Okay, so these are the landmarks, and all this stuff is in the presentation. And all these landmarks are features that are found on the bone that you would have to identify. So a fossa is a shallow depression. So it's not quite a hole, it's just like an indent in a bone. Sinus is a chamber found within a bone, and think of the sinuses in your skull. Foramen in canals. Foramen are holes that go through a bone. And it's singular is foramina. And the material that passes through there are blood vessels, nerves, those types of things. A meatus is an opening or a passageway, and we have a meatus in our skull that allows sound waves to enter our ear. Projections and processes are things that stick out. For example, those that fit in the joints are condyles. So a condyle is a smooth, rounded process found in a joint. A head fits into usually some sort of fossa. So it's the expanded end of the epiphysis. And remember when we talked about the structure of a long bone, we talked about the epiphysis and the diaphysis. Okay, and trochlea is a smooth articulation that's shaped like a pulley. We have a trochlea that makes up our elbow. Things that tendons and ligaments attach to. Remember, tendons attach muscles to bones, and ligaments attach bones to bones. So a trochanter is a large, rough projection. A tuberosity is a much smaller one. Tubercles are small, rounded projections, and a crest is a ridge, like you'd feel on your shoulder blade. And the spine is also something you feel on your shoulder blade. The crest, a better example of the crest would be on your shin. Your shin bone has a crest on it. Skeletal organization, our axial skeleton are all the bones of the head, neck, and the trunk. Okay, so these are all the bones of the head, neck, and trunk, and they're here in like this orangish color. And in green are the bones of the appendicular skeleton, or the appendages. Upper limbs, lower limbs, pelvic girdle, and pectoral girdle. All right, pectoral girdle is actually where we're going to start. When we're talking about the pectoral girdle, we're really going to look at the scapula. Okay, for the scapula, there's 4 things we have to know for this class. One is the spine of the scapula. And the spine of the scapula is this ridge right here. And you can feel the spine of the scapula. If you take your right hand and reach over your left shoulder, you can feel the spine of the scapula as you move your, say, left elbow up and down. We also have the acromion process. Okay, and this is the acromion process. And, oops, there's the acromion process. And then the other process we have to know is the coracoid process. Both of these are places for muscle attachment, tendons, and ligaments. And then the glenoid cavity, sometimes also called the glenoid fossa, and this is where the head of the humerus fits in. So your upper arm bone that head will fit into the glenoid cavity. And don't forget, when we'll talk about this when we talk about joints, but there's lots of muscles that cross here with their tendons and ligaments that help to hold the head of the humerus in there. But you can see it's not a very deep structure. So fossa, this is a great example of a fossa because it's just a small indent. Okay, now bones of the upper limb. Humerus. Humerus, we're going to talk about the head of the humerus, which is what we just saw. The head of the humerus is what fits into that glenoid cavity or that glenoid fossa. Greater tubercle is opposite, so this is lateral. This is the superior lateral part of the humerus, place for muscle attachment. The lesser tubercle, which is a smaller one, and it's inferior to the greater tubercle, also a place for muscle attachment. Deltoid tuberosity. Now remember this tuberosity, this rough projection that is about midway down the diaphysis of the humerus. And this deltoid tuberosity is where your deltoid muscle inserts. That's your big shoulder muscle. Okay, another feature to identify or be able to identify is this capitulum. And the capitulum is the lateral part of the elbow joint, with the trochlea being the medial part. We have the medial epicondyle, and then we have the lateral epicondyle, these rough projections that are on opposite sides of the bones. Okay, and between the capitulum and the trochlea, we have the coronoid fossa. Okay, and on the other side of the bone, we have the olecranon fossa. And this is the olecranon fossa, this is the posterior side of the bone that we're looking at. And the olecranon fossa is where the olecranon process from the ulna fits into here to make the elbow joint. So this is where your elbow, you would feel the bone for your elbow. Okay. Talk about the radius and the ulna. These are the two bones of the forearm. The radius is on the medial side of your forearm. So it's, I'm sorry, the radius is on the lateral side in the anatomical position. The radius is the thumb side. It's the bone on the thumb side. So if you hold your thumb up, the radius will be the superior bone. Things to know for the radius is the head of the radius. Notice that the head of the radius is like a circle, which is why it's called the radius. The radial tuberosity. A lot of muscles attached to the radial tuberosity, even though it's small. The styloid process. Styloid process you can feel in your wrist as you move down the radius. So you can even start at the thumb and move your fingers down until you feel that little bump. That's the styloid process of the radius. Okay, and then the other part to know is this ulnar notch on the radius. Okay, and the ulnar notch is right here, and it's where the radius fits into, or the ulna fits into the radius. The head of the ulna fits into the radius there. The ulna is the other bone that makes up the forearm, and this is on the medial side in anatomical position. And the things to know for the ulna are the trochlear notch, the olecranon process, and this is what fits in the olecranon fossa that's on the humerus. The coronoid process, which fits into the coronoid fossa. Styloid process. Notice the ulna also has a styloid process like the radius. So this is the styloid process of the ulna. Okay, and then the other part is we have the head of the ulna is distal, whereas the head of the radius is proximal. That's the radius and the ulna. Bones of the wrist and hand. You don't have to memorize for this class the specific bones of the wrist. You just have to know that they are called the carpal bones. And each wrist is made up of 8 carpal bones. Okay, so there are 8 carpal bones. If you're going to go into occupational therapy or physical therapy or something like that, you should probably spend some time memorizing these, but for this class, you don't really have to know the specific names. Just know that there are 8 carpal bones in each wrist. The bones that make up the back of the hand or the palm of the hand are the metacarpals, and there's 5 of those. And then we have the phalanges. So the phalanges are the finger bones. The individual phalangeal names, well, individual phalange is a phalanx. Okay? And you have the proximal phalanges, which are articulating with the metacarpals. And then for our 4 finger bones, we have these middle phalanges. So there's 4 middle phalanges. The thumb doesn't have a middle phalange, it just has a proximal and a distal. And then there's these 5 distal phalanges also. Okay, so just to review, 8 carpal bones, 5 metacarpal bones, 5 proximal phalanges, 4 middle phalanges, and then 5 distal phalanges. Okay, I should have circled this one as a proximal phalange too.